one else wanted my shift. Midnight to dawn. Midnight to dawn in a run-down roadhouse on a back road in the middle of the arse end of nowhere. Some idiot had decided there needed to be a service station here, and they threw their money at it and called it the Old Well, due to the amazing fact that there was an old well there. Not that there'd been any water in it for decades. There was even a windmill they'd put in to draw the water, but that was chained up now. Rusting. We used the well to get rid of the rubbish. It's deep, and the council charged an arm and a leg to send the trucks out here, so some smart ass had painted out the W on the sign and replaced it with a spray-painted H. So now it read, The Old Hell. Fit the place perfectly. It was hot and dusty and uncomfortable, and no one in their right mind would have wanted to spend any time there. The occasional customer we got would look shocked or sympathetic and then nick off as fast as they could. Midnight to dawn, we didn't get many customers. Even the trucks that came through only stopped if they were desperate for a piss or a pie or a coffee. Instant, of course. All the mod cons. But I loved midnight to dawn for exactly that reason. No one gawking at me. No one slagging me off. No one wondering why the daughter of the idiot who built this dump was now earning minimum wage for doing nothing at a place she obviously didn't own. No one doing anything. No one asking anything. Perfect. I had my books and my music and my rifle. The gun was licensed, of course, locked in a metal box, but there, just in case. I'd only ever had to really use it once. There are blokes who travel out this way who don't understand the word no. Blokes who might think a woman on her own at night is a soft touch or an easy mark. One bloke who probably still has 22 bullet holes in his back window and tailgate. Not a return customer, that one. Most just left after looking down the barrel. There was never any point calling the police. Nearest station was an hour away and they shut at 5 and opened at 10. No point putting in a call to the mob who run this country now. Like they'd care what happens out here. Out here, we've always taken care of ourselves. Even before the invasion, no one gave a stuff about us. We're a town full of ferals, unemployed no-hopers, old folks who've never left, religious crazies and drunks. Our town has one major attraction. The rents are so low that even we can afford them, and no one with any money wants to move in. When I was a kid, it was a bit better. We had a school and a swimming pool and a library and a supermarket, 2 churches, a bank and a pub. Now, we've got a pub. Priorities, eh? The night I'm telling you about, I was halfway through reading Pride and Prejudice for about the 18th time. Maybe we never stopped dreaming of our Mr. Darcy. I'd certainly done a fair number of auditions for mine. All turned out to be Wickham's. Just took me a while to find out. Every time. The first rays of dawn were hitting the tops of the scraggy gum trees. Birds going crazy, singing hello to each other. That's another reason I liked that shift. No matter how I felt at day's end, how cruel the world seemed as dusk fell, I'd always feel my heart lift when the birds started to chorus the dawn. The small insect eaters used the first light to catch unwary bugs. The corellas and cockatoos lift into the first rays and shine like golden angels in the light. The magpies sing so sweetly that they make the rest of them sound like a raucous bar fight. I got really annoyed if a customer turned up around dawn. So, I was really annoyed that day. I hadn't heard a car or a bike or a truck, so I was a bit worried when I heard someone mucking around with a water tank out the back. It was all the water we had, and we guarded it preciously. It doesn't rain much in these parts, and no one takes kindly to people stealing water. God knows there are plenty desperate enough to try. I copped a look out the back window, but it was just shadows out there. I could dimly see something moving and I didn't like it, so I unlocked the gun safe and got the rifle out. I went to the back door, flicked on the spotlight out the back and swung the door wide open while pointing the gun into the approximate direction of the shadows. "What the hell's going on out here?" I yelled, in as tough a tone as I could muster. Can't say it went that well. The spotlight blinded me. The door swung back and smashed me in the right arm. I accidentally pulled the trigger and the rifle went off. There was a yell and a crash and I saw someone fall back into a pile of old petrol cans. My arm hurt like hell. My heart was going like the clappers. I thought I'd killed someone. Already I could tell that this was going to be a different sort of day. Not in a good way. At least that's how it started. When my eyes adjusted and I'd put another bullet in the chamber, I could see a youngish bloke sitting in the dust, examining a nice, clean, 22-shaped hole in his akubra. "Close," he says. And he's smiling, looking about as dangerous as a sleeping koala. "Don't move an inch," I said. "What are you doing out here? Where's your car?" "No car. Walking. Just looking to refill my water bottle. Could you give me a drink, please?" Educated voice. Manners. An out-of-towner for sure. "You scared the shit out of me, city boy, stumbling round out the back here. Why couldn't you just come through the front door and ask like a normal person? No one leaves tap handles on their tanks out here. You not heard about the drought?" "Thought you might be sleeping," he said. "Didn't look all that busy. I didn't want to bother you." He held up an old plastic 2-litre drink bottle. "Don't need much." "And why should I give you water, mate? You're not one of us. No one asked you to wander around out here trying to kill yourself. You're out of your comfort zone, kid." Calling him a kid was a bit rough, but I reckoned I had at least a decade on him. And that's when it started to get weird. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his pants, and sat his hat back on his head. He just looked at me. Just looked. Not creepy, not angry, not even unwelcome, to be fair. He was a good-looking lad. But he wasn't checking me out, more like he was reading me, getting the lay of the land. I dropped the barrel towards the floor. He wasn't giving off bad vibes, just the opposite. Then he said just about the strangest thing I've ever heard anyone say, at least to me. He just looked straight into my eyes and said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Now, I'd been brought up religious before my family went to pieces and we exploded to all parts, but not mainstream religion. We were always a bit of a fringe group. So it's not like I'd never heard anyone talk about God before, but he freaked me out. It wasn't the weirdness of what he said, but the absolute conviction with which he said it. Like he was offering me something real. I was looking at this dusty wanderer and thinking, what's the catch? Because there's always a catch. And I'm almost always caught. So I just went with the first thing that came into my head. "Mate, you have no bucket and the well is deep and dry. Where are you going to get that living water you're offering? Are you smarter than the elders who showed my dad where to sink that well? Who shared their water and watched as we drained it for rice and cotton and stock? There is no living water here anymore. Groundwater's gone. Everything here is dead." I pointed to the tank. "That's it, mate. And there's little enough of that. Last half-decent rain out here was about 4 months back." His eyes never left me. I was still fighting the urge to raise the gun again or run inside, but something stopped me. There was a charge in the dawn air, like the world was ending, or beginning, or flipping on its head. He tapped the tank. "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water, gushing up to eternal life. I didn't want to. I was scared. But I looked up and met his gaze and held it. I stared deep into his eyes. I don't know how he did it, but in his eyes I saw things I'd forgotten and felt things I'd imagined I'd never feel again. Lights went on behind his pupils and I saw myself back in church as a kid, dreaming of a world that was peaceful and kind and in which I had a place and a future. I remember believing that I would be welcome there. I remember the feeling of being loved and accepted and valued, things I hadn't felt for longer than I wanted to remember. I saw myself laughing. I felt the goodness of being held by a person who didn't want anything more than to hold me. I let stuff in that I'd been keeping out for too long. And then, the worst thing, I started to cry. I hadn't cried for 15 years. I was ashamed of myself. I'd sworn I'd never let anyone hurt me that badly again, and I'd never give anyone the satisfaction of watching me weep, but I bawled that morning. Bawled as the sun rose, bawled so loudly the magpies stopped singing. Into the silence came a beating of wings, and a bloody great cockatoo landed on the water tank. And he stared at me too. His crest was lit by the dawn light, a yellow flame flickering like a neon sign. My face was covered in snot and tears. Dropped to my knees and I pushed the gun away. The young bloke didn't move. He just kept his eyes on me in a way that reminded me of how my mother had looked at me when I was really little. As if I was precious. He looked at me as if I was precious. He knelt in the dust with me. I said, I don't know who you are or what's going on, but please give me this water so that I will never be thirsty or have to keep coming here for water. I realised that it was in the midnight to dawn shift that I'd been sipping at something that was just keeping me alive but wasn't ever going to restore me to a life worth living. Please! He held out his hand and helped me up. I picked up the rifle, walked inside and locked it away. Then he sat at the counter, looked at me again and said, Go, call your husband and come back. That broke the spell. Where the hell had that come from? I was rocked. I looked hard at him, but he hadn't changed his expression. I still felt safe, so I just replied, I have no husband, which was part of the truth. Then the kicker came. As neutral as you like, but still a smack in the guts. He kept looking straight at me and continued, You are right in saying I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. Thanks for being honest with me. All I could think of was that he's from the welfare or Centrelink or some government agency come to check on me, but I don't tell any lies to government. I can't afford to. I've had my payments cut off before and it's no fun. I play a clean game with all my forms. I didn't get it at all. How did he know that stuff? Because he was spot on. I'm not proud of it. But I'm not ashamed of it either. I've made my share of mistakes, but I needed out of all those marriages or I wouldn't be alive today. I wouldn't be going there again. I'm done with the altar and promises that get broken and bones that get broken and eyes that get blackened. He touched the darkness I'd put away and I didn't like it. Not one bit. I felt like I was standing in the open with nowhere to hide. I felt seen. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to be. even by this bloke with the empty water bottle and a hole in his hat. It was then that the lights went on in my brain and my heart leapt. I remember the God bit of what he'd said. And I remember the stories of people, men and women, who God sent to set things right. The prophets they taught us about when we were kids. The mad ones who spoke for justice without fear or favour. The touched ones who got their tongues burnt with burning coals and all that sort of thing. I realised he might be a touched one. Touched by something real big or just something real. Because even with the shock of this turn in the conversation, when I looked at him, I still believed he had my interest at heart. I'd never had a conversation with someone who was so present for me. Not just with me, for me. So I decided to play my wild card, to go all in with him on this weirdness and wildness. I said to him, mate, I can tell that you're one of those prophets, like in the old days. But I don't know what you're doing here or why you're talking to me. You're dead set not from our church mob or from this place. And I've left all that behind anyway. We don't believe the same things. You got your ideas and we've got ours. I've got mine. I don't think you want to know who I really am. You don't want to go there. I don't think I'm who you're looking for. I don't think that if you knew about me, you'd want to know me. And even as I said it, I regretted it, because I did want him to know me. I didn't want him to pull away. He was weird, but weird good. He put his hat on the counter, and he stared out into the light of the rising sun cutting in through the dirty front windows, through the ads for long discontinued soft drinks and cigarettes. For a long time I thought he'd given up on me, decided that I wasn't worth knowing. Then he turned back to me and his eyes had gone sad and dark, and just for a moment I thought he was going to cry. "Woman," he said quietly, "look into my eyes again. Believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship God neither in this place or in the city. Your lot worship what you do not know. My lot we worship what we know. For salvation starts with us. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when all true worshippers will worship God in spirit and truth. For God seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." Then he looked away again, and I swear I did see tears roll down his cheeks. I could see his eyes following the birds as they flew into the light. His hand was on the counter, and I put mine on his. He didn't flinch or pull it away. His fingers curled around mine. I had another burst of memory flood through me, as if touching him had released even more things that had been stored away. I stammered, "I was taught when I was a kid that the Messiah was coming. I loved that story. It made me feel safe. They said that when he comes, he will reveal all things to us. Do you know that story? Do you believe it? Do you know who he is?" Again, he was quiet, as if he was deciding whether to speak. Then he turned back to me with his cheeks wet, and he brought his other hand onto the counter and held mine in both of his, but gently, as if he was wanting to be sure not to hurt me. And again he lifted his eyes to mine, and his face broke into the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. And he said, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." He said it as if it had been a burden he'd been carrying that he'd finally been allowed to drop. He said it as if he really wanted me to believe him. He said it as if it were as a gift to me. And I did believe him. I do believe him. The moment was broken by tapping on the window. 10 or 20 shaggy, dusty-looking hikers, all with their faces pushed up against the glass. I turned towards the gun safe again. He kept hold of my hand and simply said, "It's okay. They're my friends. They slept in as always. They've just caught up. It's okay." They filed in, and I made them all coffee and toasted sandwiches. They called him Jesus. He wouldn't eat. Said he'd already had, but I wasn't sure what he meant. They all looked at me as if I was some sort of threat. They looked at me as if I was a feral loser from the scrub, which I was, or had been, until minutes ago. Maybe they'd seen him holding my hand. I don't know. I was putting them on edge even while I was feeding them, but I'm used to people looking at me as if I'm rubbish. What I wasn't used to was the way he looked at me. I grabbed my car keys and I asked him if he'd look after the place for an hour while I went home. He just nodded and his mates started whining like a flock of sheep kept from the grass. I don't even know what I was thinking, but I knew it was the day that church met in the old schoolhouse. I hadn't been for a long time, but I thought I might drop in and tell them a new story. Tell them something that might be worth believing. When I got there, I pushed through the door and they stopped in the middle of a song. They looked almost as shocked and outraged to see me as I was to actually be in there again. The pastor came towards me as if he was going to throw me out, but as he got closer, he just stopped and stared, then got out of my way. I knew what I was doing. I walked up to the lectern. I took in all those folk I'd once known, mainly old folk now. I started to tell them the story of that morning. The story of meeting the man who said he was the Messiah. When I pulled back into the driveway of the old hell, there was a string of cars following me. Dust flew up as the drivers parked and cautiously got out of their utes and trucks and cars. Jesus came out of the roadhouse and his mates followed him. It was like the start of a gunfight in an old movie, both sides checking each other out. But there was no fight. He shook hands and introduced himself and led them all round the back to where the well was, where the windmill was chained up. He went to the garage and got bolt cutters and broke the chain. The blades started to turn again as a breeze blew in, and that great bloody cockatoo sat on the tail vane and spread his wings to the sun. Jesus sat on the edge of the old well and started to talk to the mob from town, telling them stories and answering their questions. By the time the first truck of the day rolled in for diesel, they'd already invited him and his mates to stay in town for a few days. Before he left, he walked over to me and reached out his hand for mine. He placed a cockatoo feather in my hand, looked at me, smiled. I told him to wait. I brought him back his water bottle, the one that got left out the back when I nearly shot him. I'd filled it for him. 2 days later, that church mob were mostly convinced that he was the Messiah, and convinced that they'd discovered it all by themselves without my story being needed. And that's people for you, eh? We all need to think we've discovered the thing that changes us. On the 3rd day, I went back out for my shift. Midnight. I heard the windmill blades squeaking away in the breeze. I was going to have to get the owner to have it serviced. I flicked on the spotlight out the back and went to chain it up again. I froze. Water was spilling out onto the ground from the top of the tank, and the discharge pipe from the windmill just kept pumping water in. I chained it off before the tank burst or the yard flooded. I walked to the well and looked in. The moon was full and directly above me. No rubbish, just my reflection in the clean, clear water. I got a cloth and some paint stripper and started on the H.